ladies, I got my first cycle back postpartum this week. I'm on day 2, and when I tell you the ducks are not in a row, the ducks are not in a row. And that is the topic for another episode. We're going to be digging into the hormonal shift that our bodies go through postpartum because me and my friends, the cycles postpartum are like times 10 on steroids than they were pre-baby. So we're on the struggle bus today a little bit. Bear with me. Welcome to the first episode of the Maternal Podcast. I am so excited to be here. I'm so excited to tell you guys how I came up with Maternal, where it's at right now, my vision for it, all of those good things. I really want this to be a place for us to have honest conversations, really dig into evidence based research, and just have like a place where we can be face to face, talk about birth stories, get your questions answered. I want to be interviewing providers, doing all the fun things, and I'm just so stoked to have this opportunity to do this for you guys. Now, if you are a founding mother, you're here from beta testing with the Maternal app. I am sure that you're wondering where in the world is this app, and I genuinely I wish I could tell you, guys. This process of building an app has been so much more involved than I ever dreamed it would be. I mean, truly. Now, let me preface, I am not a developer. I am a level 0 coder. I don't know anything about anything. But I had this crazy idea to create this app. And, my husband has heard a lot of crazy ideas from me. I am a big dreamer. I come up with lots of ideas. I'm very creative. And this was the first idea that I came up with that he was actually like, that's a really good idea. You actually have something going here and not, you're crazy. He's never said that to my face, but I'm pretty sure he thinks I'm crazy a lot of the time. So where's the app? Guys, I got the app finished. I've been working on this for 7 months. I finally got the app finished. I got very excited. I got it launched onto Test Flight, which is Apple's app testing tool essentially. And I jumped the gun on letting you guys know. I immediately sent out an email to my founding mother saying, "Guys, the app it's into Test Flight. It's getting reviewed." Okay. When I downloaded the app on my phone and attempted to log into it for the first time, access denied. When I tell you my heart sunk. I thought it was an easy fix. I went back into the code, adjusted some stuff, came back. No, did it again, not fixed. Finally decided to grab a developer to help me. We troubleshooted this thing for probably 3 weeks. I mean, I'm telling you, I was around the clock troubleshooting. My house had gotten neglected. My poor kids were begging for my attention, and it just was not happening. So I ended up having to give it over to a special engineering team. I am working on their timeline. They're very busy. They cannot give me a timeline. I do not have an update as of this moment, unfortunately. But I promise you it's coming. I'm still working on it every single day. I am fighting for it to be ready, and I promise you it's coming. I just need you to bear with me a little bit, and that is why the podcast is now happening, because since we are so behind on the beta testing timeline, I needed to get something in motion. I wanted to start the conversation somewhere. So thus here we are. I also want to talk about a little bit why I wanted to do a podcast. I think that, information for women's health is available, but you have to dig. And it's really hard to be able to differentiate confirmation bias versus fact and truth. And I have been working very hard on my researching skills. And I just want to have a place where we can have honest discussions and make sure that you are properly informed on your decisions. I want to be clear that I do not have the belief that everybody should birth at home. I do not have the belief that everybody should have an unmedicated birth. I'm going to put an asterisk right there. What I do believe in is everybody knowing what their options are and just being empowered in yourself to know what questions ask your providers, how to interview providers proficiently, and really just have a space where we can get a little more personal and have discussions. So I'm really looking to just expand the conversation beyond what I can do on Instagram or even in an app. So I have really exciting things coming, but before I jump into what will be coming onto the podcast, I did open up my Instagram, which if you are not following Maternal on Instagram, you can find us at we.r.maternal. I want to talk to you about why I created Maternal, but it also is going to kind of connect with like my birth stories. And I opened my Instagram up to questions from you guys to ask me. And 2 of the questions were hospital versus home birth and my birth stories. Now, those both tie into why I created Maternal. So I'm going to dive into all of that. I'm going to start with my birth story. I got pregnant at the age of 24 years old. I really had no desire to do a home birth. I knew I wanted to do unmedicated, but I wasn't even really aware of the birthing space, what my choices were, informed consent, none of that. So I was not even seeing a midwife at the time when I conceived my first baby. I just called an OB in my area. They got me in. And when I mentioned to my OB that I wanted to have an unmedicated birth, she automatically pushed me to the midwives, which honestly made me feel a little bit of a kind of way because I do have a genetic disorder. It's a metabolic disorder called MCAD, and it can cause complications in pregnancy. And so it was important to me that my provider be aware of that because with potential complications, I thought was that would fall out of midwifery care. That wasn't the case, but I was a little disheartened to see that, the OB wasn't even interested in supporting an unmedicated labor. So they switched me over to the midwife, and it was lovely. I'm actually thankful that I got switched over to the midwife because it really immersed me into birth culture and education and wanting to tell everybody what I've learned along these years. So once I got in with the midwife team, I had a really great pregnancy. I'm blessed to say that both of my pregnancies thus far have been low risk. I have not really dealt with a whole lot of struggles. I know that I'm very blessed to say that. My pregnancies were honestly picture perfect. I went into labor on Easter Sunday of 2024, and that was a crazy day. Let me just tell you. So, I had a doula for my first pregnancy. She was very great and very informative, but I also had some things that I wasn't crazy about. So, the morning that I went into labor, I woke up at 6 a.m. I thought that I had peed the bed, and I hiked my leg up to get out of bed, kind of like this. And when I hiked my leg up to get out of bed, I gushed. And I was like, great, I just peed the bed. That's wonderful. So I got up, I go to the bathroom, use the bathroom, and I'm like, for the amount of liquid that came out in the bed, I'm still peeing a lot. So, maybe my water broke. So I go back in my room and it's steadily trickling down my leg. I wake up my husband and I'm like, hey, I think my water broke. And he's like, are you sure? And I'm like, well, I thought I peed the bed, but I'm pretty sure. So I do an inversion. And an inversion is where you like have your forearms on the ground, your butt's in the air. So I have a platform bed, so it's relatively low to the ground. So I had my knees on the bed. I had my hands on the ground, booty up, head down. I did that for a second. I stood back up, and gravity did its job and pulled the fluid down. And I for sure my water had broken. So I called my mom, and I'm kind of stressing out because, like I told you, it's Easter Sunday, and at the time my mom was the worship leader for our church, and Easter Sunday is one of the busiest days at church. And I tell her that I'm in labor, and she's like, well, let me call the pastor, figure out what we're going to do. I call my mother in law. I let her know I'm in labor. I decide to get in the shower because one thing my midwives has taught me is that you stay home as long as you can. So I knew not to call anybody right away. I got in the shower and things started picking up really quickly. And I decided to call the midwife while I was in the shower. And the midwife on call told me that I was likely in early labor. I needed to be resting. She was glad I was in the shower using the warm water to my advantage. To make sure I eat, make sure I rest, which is on par what they should be recommending when you are in early labor. Now, the thing that was freaking me out was that I'm telling you, typically, like I was 38 weeks, so when I was early for first pregnancy, there really is no such thing. But typically, you're gonna carry longer. I would say like you should always expect to be pregnant to 42 weeks. Let me just say that. And so when I went into labor at 38, it was kind of concerning because I was like, why is it like is everything okay? Why is it so early? Whatever. And it was picking up fast, like very fast. And so I called my doula because I quickly got to a point where there was no more talking through my contractions. There was no laying down. There was no eating. And it was like 3 hours in between from when my water had broken to this point, which is fast. Like that's very fast. And so I called my doula and I'm like, listen, or my mom called my doula on my behalf because I was bent over a yoga ball contracting every 2 minutes. And the doula was like, there's no way, like you're in early labor, you need to be resting. And I was like, I was starting to get a little panicky, and I really wanted her to be with me, and she wouldn't come because it's Easter Sunday. And I I worked through it a little bit longer. I called the midwife again, and the midwife was like, "Listen, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but it really is in your best interest to stay home. You are likely still in early labor, but ultimately it's your decision." And so I decided that I was going to go in there anyways because I was really getting to a point where I needed additional support because I was starting to feel a little bit scared because no one can prepare you for what labor and what contractions are like. I mean, it is intense. It is very, very intense. And so I go to the hospital. It's a 30-minute drive from where I'm living at the time. And laboring at that point, labor in the car is very hard because you're sitting, you're confined to your car seat. And one thing that's crucial to labor is movement. And it was very difficult. I finally get there and I just want to get to labor and delivery. When we finally get there, like I am absolutely sobbing because I'm like, finally, like I have support, I'm safe, everything's okay. And things start going like this, guys, I'm telling you. So I get to the room and I ask for them to do a cervical check, which I know in natural labor crunchy community, like cervical checks are a little bit controversial for various reasons, but I value cervical checks and I want you to know that if you value that information about your body, you should feel free to ask for a cervical check. But if you are the person that values to not have that, let me segue into this really quick. So, the fear behind getting cervical checks in labor is one, if they do a cervical check on you and they tell you that you're dilated less than what you imagine that you were, is there a potential for that to stall labor in that moment? Because let's say you thought you're at a 7 or an 8, they check you, you're at a 2 or a 3. Is that going to leave you feeling discouraged? Is that going to leave you feeling doubtful of yourself? Is that going to stall labor? Because your mindset really, really affects how you're in labor. So you need to self examine yourself and know how you think that would affect you if that certain situation happened to you. I think the other concerns are potential infections, but if you want to have that information about your body, you have the ability to get it. If you do not care to have that information about your body, you have full right to say no, thank you. Okay. I asked them to do a cervical check on me, and they did, and I was 6, almost 7 centimeters, and I just started crying because that's right about inactive labor, and everyone just kept trying to tell me that I was in early labor, and it wasn't time because it was just happening way too fast. And so I looked at her, which I loved my midwife that I had on call. Mind you, the facility that I was with, they probably had like maybe 6 or 7 midwives. I met every single midwife except the single one that was on call that day. So I am with a brand new provider I've never met before, and I looked at her and I said, "I'm really glad that I didn't take your advice and I came in." And she said, "I'm really glad too." So that was very reassuring. Eventually, my doula did come and set up my room. I really didn't rely on anybody but my partner the entire time that I was in labor. I did eventually get into the laboring tub, but where I was giving birth, they don't actually allow you to give birth in the water, hospital policy. So I ended up getting out of the water right at transition. They ended up checking me again. I was about 9 centimeters. And so they started doing some movements on me to help baby descend. We did some side lying releases. If you're not familiar with side lying release, it is awful, but it is very much necessary. It really helps put your pelvis in the correct position as well as baby just to optimize them coming down through the birth canal. I'll put a diagram up here so you can see what that position looks like. And I had desired to give birth on my hands and knees. I did get in that position and I wasn't loving it. So they had me go on my back, which, again, controversial. And I pushed for about 2 hours on my back and I was not making great progress. And once I got to the 2 hour mark, the midwife had made a comment like, "Hey, we're getting to the 2 hour mark of you pushing. If things don't start happening, like we might need to think about getting the OB team in either with like forceps or vacuum or some sort of intervention because it seems like you're having a hard time like getting him through." Because the problem is that his head was, you could see his head, but every time the contraction would pass, he would come back up into the birth canal, which is normal behavior. Um, and that moment scared me because that was actually opposite of what I wanted. And, I didn't have an epidural. And so I was kind of more so worried about the pain itself from them forcing my baby out versus like the intervention itself, if that makes sense. And so I asked if I could move positions. I wanted to get out of the bed and move around. And thankfully they allowed me. I ended up getting on a birth stool. And within like 3 or 4 pushes, I had that baby out thanks to gravity. So I'm really glad that I advocated for myself in that moment. I really can't remember if it was myself that advocated for myself or the doula. Either way, it's important that you have someone to advocate for you in the room. I'm really glad I ended up getting on the birthing stool because, like I said, baby did come out within 3 or 4 pushes. And it was absolutely miraculous. Oh, and I tell you, the birth high is something I've never done drugs. I've smoked weed, but I've never done drugs. And the birth high, out of this world. As soon as that baby was out, I remember saying, I could do that a million times. That is the most amazing thing I've ever done in my life. And I was hooked. Okay. From that moment, I was absolutely obsessed and fascinated with everything birth and delivery, unmedicated labor, the physiology of birth. I mean, it was instant, right? Um, After I had the baby, everything was looking really good. I was bleeding. There's kind of some gray area here. So after I had him, they got me on the bed. I delivered my placenta, whole nine. And they told me that I was bleeding a little bit more than they had liked, and so they asked if they could administer pitocin. And of course, when someone says like, "Hey, you're bleeding more than we like to see," you're gonna say yes, especially if you don't know what's normal, what's not normal. And nothing was wrong with me getting Pitocin. It didn't make me feel any certain type of way. It was what it was. However, going forward to my next pregnancy, I brought up some situations from my first labor that concerned me to my midwife for my second pregnancy, and things that were brought to my attention deemed as not normal. In her eyes, were actually very normal in a physiological world, right? So one instance, they told me an hour or two of pushing that if we didn't make progress, they were going to have to bring someone else in. And when I brought this to my new midwife's attention, my CPM, certified professional midwife who works outside of hospital setting, she was like, that is very normal. Like, especially like a new mom, 2 hours is absolutely nothing. I wouldn't bat an eye at 2 hours of pushing. And I was like, well, why were they rushing me? I guess it's just hospital policy. I don't know. Could I have gotten an intervention if I didn't advocate for myself to move? That was unnecessary? Absolutely. And that is what I don't like about birth in hospital setting most of the time, especially if you don't have someone advocating for you that knows better, right? The second thing was the bleeding scenario. One of my greatest fears is hemorrhaging in birth. It's a real thing, it's a real risk. And when they brought to my attention that I was bleeding more than they'd like to see, of course, I was immediately like, yes, administer Pitocin. I don't want to hemorrhage. Well, I don't know if you know this, but if you go back to your birth documents, like I use my chart with my facility, and I can go into my chart and I can read the charting basically, because they have to document everything that happened from the time you get there to the time you leave. They document every single thing that happens. And so I read through my chart and my birthing notes and everything, and I was able to see the amount like the exact amount of blood that they measured that I had lost. And so because they had told me I bled more than what was normal, when I saw that number, I researched it, and the number that was present on the chart was a very normal amount of blood loss, because with birth comes blood. That is very normal. And I brought this to my midwife's attention, and she was like, "Oh, that is a very normal amount of blood loss. That did not call for pitocin. But I will tell you that administering pitocin post birth is just hospital policy. So if you didn't know any better, you didn't know any better." And like I said, thankfully I had no adverse reaction to the Pitocin. It didn't bother me in any sort type of way. But like, if it wasn't something that was 100% medically necessary, then why are we offering it? Like that. Again, let me be clear. I love my midwife. I had a fantastic labor and delivery there. But just those two things that, you know, it wasn't necessary outside of hospital policy, and hospital policy is not law. So I just want to say that to be clear. If there's something that they're trying to push for you to do that you know is not necessary, you have an advocate there. Do not be afraid to say, no, thank you, I don't want that. Because you can. With my second baby, I was uninsured with my first child. So I had to pay everything out of pocket for prenatal to delivery. I actually had insurance and did not know this until I had my first appointment. My insurance policy didn't cover dependent pregnancies. I was not aware of that. I was on my parents' insurance. And so, crazy. Welcome to America. I signed up, I had to pay everything out of pocket. So I was in a great deal of debt when I got pregnant with my second from my first, and I just could not take on double that again, because I was on my own policy with my second pregnancy, but the out of pocket expenses still was beyond $10,000. And in today's economy, like, who has that kind of money laying around? So I decided to do a home birth, and financial responsibility should never be the reasoning behind home birth, but it just kind of played hand in hand in this situation. I ended up getting in contact with an amazing CPM, in the area that I live in, and we assessed to see if I would be a great candidate for home birth, and I was. So I decided to go that route. Now, it did take a lot of self examining, a lot of prayer in my case to make sure I was making the right decision, as well as talking with my partner, because when you decide to have a home birth, everybody has to be on the same page, and there cannot be any room for fear, especially untalked about fear, because fear will block, can potentially block labor, right? So my partner and I made the decision that we trusted the CPM, we trusted my body and God to give me the home birth that I had been desiring. Again, I had another really great pregnancy. I'm really thankful to say that. No sickness, no crazy food aversions. I carried actually longer with my second pregnancy than I did with my first. I believe I was 41 weeks. I believe I was 41 weeks. Let's see. Let's fact check that. I was 40 weeks and 4 days with my second baby. And my midwife told me when I came into her care, she said when people come from hospital setting into home birth setting, they always carry longer. And I didn't believe her. She said I don't know the science behind it, but they always carry longer. Well, I should have listened to her and believed her because I was convinced I was going to give birth again right around 38 weeks because I had my first, and typically they say with subsequent pregnancies you're likely to go earlier. That's not the case. Do not believe that. Anytime you're pregnant, always convince yourself you're going to be pregnant until you're 42 plus, okay? Because if you don't, you're going to ruin it for yourself, and that's exactly what I did. Once I hit that like 37-week mark, I was like, "Oh, it's coming. It's right around the corner." No, dog. I was pregnant for 4 more weeks. It was horrible. No, it was great. Let me not say it's horrible. But the day I went into labor, it was 3 a.m. I had gone through 2 weeks of prodromal labor, which prodromal labor is just false labor. Essentially, it is very real contractions because the body remembers. The body remembers your previous labors, and it was a mind game. I'll tell you that. And there had been even a day where I kept my husband home from work because I was convinced today was the day, and it was not. But the day that it did happen, I was not convinced at first that I was actually in active labor. And what's funny is towards the end of your pregnancies, you start like really keeping your house clean because you're like, okay, we got to have the baby come into a clean home. Not that the baby cares, but when you're nesting, the nesting will have you do some really crazy things. Like I had to paint my bedroom before I had my baby, and my doula actually came over and helped me paint my bedroom with my second baby. God bless her. And so when I went into labor, the house had not been cleaned. The room had not been cleaned. The room had not even really been set up because I was at the point where I was like, I'm never having this baby. It's never going to happen. And it did. And thankfully, my sweet doula and my best friend, they came over. They cleaned up my room. My husband and my dad cleaned my kitchen. We had a whole crew at the birth. It was crazy. I labored for probably about, let's see, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, probably for like 5 or 6 hours. I handled labor really well with my second pregnancy as well. I never want to say that labor is easy. It is intense, but with the right tools and the right mental preparation, and having your trusted support person nearby, it makes labor very manageable. And when my midwife finally got there, I asked her to do a cervical check on me, and I was at 8 centimeters, and that was very reassuring for me. I finally decided then that I would get into the birthing tub just to help me through transition. I thought I would want to give birth in there because I didn't get to have that experience with my first, but I actually didn't love it. And so I asked to get out of the water, and they had me sit in a birthing stool because that's how I gave birth the first. So I guess because it felt familiar, I wanted to do that. And I started like kind of losing trust in myself a little bit because I had expected that my second labor be a little bit easier than my first because again the body remembers, and my baby was very low. He was in a very optimal position. I believe that he was OA, meaning that head down facing my spine, with the back of their head pointing towards the front of my belly, which is considered one of the more safe and optimal birthing positions for baby. And it was not easy. I was having a really hard time, and I remember having to ask my midwife for reassurance multiple times, asking her if everything was okay, if I was pushing good, and things just were not really progressing as fast as I had hoped, and I was getting tired, and it was hard. It was very hard. And one thing that she had noticed when I was sitting on the birthing stool is that I had a tendency to pull my knees up, right? And so she wanted me to change position again, and she had me get on my hands and knees. And mind you, I had audience for my birth because I have a lot of people that I wanted with me. Because one thing that helps me get through labor is like really feeling supported and loved. And so I had my mom present in the room, my husband was present in the room, my best friend was present in the room, as well as my mother in law. And one thing that I am very self conscious about is my rear. Okay. I do not want anybody looking at my butthole. I don't like it. I don't feel comfortable. I will never like it. And so as soon as she had me moved to my hands and knees, I had an audience watching me. I don't know how information I should be giving out right now, but like bowel movements happen in labor, right? And people are staring at my rear. They say they weren't. I don't believe it. So I quickly asked for everybody to leave the room. I was not enjoying myself. I asked everybody to leave the room. It was just my midwife and my husband and my mom at the time. Because when I was getting scared, I was very self conscious and insecure. Everyone left the room, and I think my midwife could tell that I was kind of getting in a really weird headspace, and so she really wanted to see what was going on because I think there was starting to be wonder if like there was some sort of like inability for baby to come through the pelvis. I don't know. So she had me move to my back on the floor, and she had me hike my knees up here, what felt like up to my cheekbones, and we did a few contractions there, and she started realizing that I was making really great progress pushes in that position. So we stayed there. And then midwives routinely monitor your baby between every contraction or during every contraction. And at one of the checks, when she was checking his heart rate, it was really starting to go down and get slow. And I remember that moment being really scary, honestly. But I kept myself calm. I didn't even address the heart rate out loud because I trusted my midwife that she knew what she was doing. She knew how to keep myself and my baby safe. And when she heard that decel, she looked at me and she said, "Okay, that is your baby signaling to us that he is ready to be born. And so I really need you to push with everything that you have. He's ready to be born right now." And I said, "Yes, ma'am." I gave it my all. And thus, baby was born. Now, when baby was coming out, I don't know this for fact. She may have very well known what part of my baby's head was emerging. However, it just seemed at the moment that we were all kind of like, what part of his head is that? It's coming out. Turned out he was asynclitic. And if you're not familiar with that term, so basically when your baby's born, optimal position is going to be chin tucked to chest, like this. Move my hair. You want their chin tucked to their chest, right? However, when my baby was born, he was like this. And that is why it was so extremely hard to get him pushed out. Asynclitic births are tough. They are tough. And we had no idea that he was asynclitic. So I guess sometime between the last scan and belly mapping that I had received, something got him wonky. And honestly, I believe what it was, I was doing a lot of lounging around at that time. I mean, I was 40 weeks pregnant with a toddler, trying to be a stay at home mom, and I was exhausted. And I think that all of my reclining and relaxing probably had a part in that. And after I had him, I did not experience the birth high that time. And I remember being concerned that something was wrong because I was still in so much pain after I had him. And I remember asking my midwife, like, "I'm still in so much pain." Like, and she was like, "Well, honey, you just delivered an 8 pound, 8 ounce baby who is asynclitic. Like, yeah, you're going to be in pain, but you're fine. You did great." So I didn't experience the birth high with my second. It was honestly more, I wouldn't say traumatic per se, but it was a lot harder and a lot more painful my second time around versus my first. And after I had him, I said multiple times, I will never do that again. I will get an epidural for the next baby. That, no, that quickly faded. I think that I will do it the same way around the next time. And it was still a really great experience, and I'm really thankful that I hand selected the midwife that I did because she was amazing, as well as my doula. She was amazing throughout the entire process, keeping me motivated and in the right headspace. And my partner, my husband, was an amazing support person. He is very calming and very reassuring, and he was great throughout the entire thing. So those are my birth stories, and yeah, crazy, right? To tie that into why I created maternal. So, the instances in the hospital of things that were not medically necessary or emergent. Granted, they were not life or death situations, thankfully. I'm very thankful for that. But while mine is simple, there are people who do not know how to advocate for themselves where it does turn into life or death. And um, I'm very pro doctor. I'm very pro medicine. If you know me, you know that I walk a very middle ground line of supporting medicine as well as holistic medicine. And I just think that informed care, informed consent, and just being as educated as you possibly can is very important. And I feel like in the physiological realm, there's kind of like an information gap in terms of with like apps on your phone, like your Flow app, your Bump, your What to Expect. They're great apps with medical information, with updates on the baby. But when it comes to women who are seeking to have a physiological birth, whether that be hospital setting or at home, there is a huge information gap there, and I want to fill that gap because I think that every woman, no matter how they want to birth, deserve to be supported the same, right? And I think that if you want to have a physiological birth in a hospital setting, there are specific ways that you have to advocate for yourself because medical settings just some of them are. I'm not discrediting that, but some of them are not. And you have to know how to properly advocate for yourself and know what questions to ask. And so that's why I decided to come up with maternal. I just want to be a resource for moms to get their questions answered from expert providers, from evidence based research. And I want to make it clear that I am not the medical expert. I am not the professional. I am representing the curious mom. And so I have blended, information from professionals, from CPMs, from CNMs, from IBCLCs. I want to get perinatal mental health specialists to come on. So this is not information that's from myself. I'm curating a collective of information from other providers, and I hope that as I progress in life, that I will eventually become a birth worker myself. I have aspirations to, I don't know if midwife is the answer or childbirth educator is the answer. I'm still kind of like soul searching for that answer. But I am very, 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 what's the word I'm looking for? Hello, mom brain fog. Girl, get it together. Why can I not think of this word right now? Oh, passionate. Oh my God. I couldn't come up with the word passionate. I'm very passionate on making sure that women are educated and informed. That is very important to me. And I have heard some really traumatic, crazy birth stories that 100% could have been prevented. Um, Women that have gotten their desires torn away from them for reasons that were not medically necessary. And I'm sure you're saying, well, if you're not a medical expert, who are you to say? But trust me, I will bring them on and we can talk about it ourselves and you will see why. It's important to me that women know that they don't have to listen to the system if they don't want to, right? I'm very passionate about having a doula with you. Doulas can be your very best friend and advocate when it comes to birth, right? And that is what I want maternal to be. I want maternal to be a safe place where people can come and get information, better advocate for themselves, know the right questions to ask, and not feel um, judged for making the decision on how they want to birth. You want to birth with the epidural in a hospital? Great. You want to birth with an induction? Okay. You want to get a cesarean? Okay. You want to have a home birth? Okay. Whatever you want to do. This is a place for everybody to seek information because I think information is very baseline. Everybody should know it, right? That's what I hope maternal to be. I'd love for it to go beyond the app. I want it to become a community. We have the podcast now. I want it to continue to evolve, but I really love this space that I'm creating right now, and I'm really excited that you're here with me, and I'm excited to meet you here in this space. One of the last questions that I received on my Instagram was two things that no one can prepare you for when you conceive. And I took this as a very personal question. I think this is very person to person. I think everybody would answer this question differently. But the two things for me, the first one is that when you announce that you're pregnant, you're about to get information overload and opinion overload from every way that you look. And what's tricky about that is that Jane down the street this way and Sarah down the street that way are going to give you two pieces of information that are conflicting against each other, but they might both be right. Okay. Um, a lot of information that you receive is they're coming from the best interest of their heart. However, it quickly gets very overwhelming and it gets to a point where it's very hard to filter out the noise. And so I just give like my advice to you for that is to take in what you want to take in, but also release what doesn't apply. And if you're my friend, you've probably heard me say, when you come to me about something, I will say, do you want me to listen or do you want advice? And if you want advice, I will say, all right, take what applies, and if it doesn't apply, let it go. Apply that to every situation in your life, okay? Everyone's different. Everybody's preferences are different. Every single baby is different, and it's okay if people tell you something and you're just like in the ear out the other, right? Um, the second thing for me is a little bit heavy, just to be honest. When I find out that I'm pregnant, it absolutely consumes my brain. Everything I do, I'm like, "Hey, you're pregnant. Hey, you're pregnant. Oh yeah, I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant." And I deal with a lot of anxiety when I first get pregnant about miscarriage. I don't want to say that miscarriage is common, but I guess in a way it is. You know, 1 in 4 women experience miscarriage, and I'm sure that you know somebody that has experienced miscarriage. And I always felt very dismissed when I would like say that fear out loud, like, oh, there's nothing to worry about, like you'll be fine. And I just don't think that it's something that's talked about enough out of like it being a taboo topic, because obviously nobody wants to discuss miscarriage. But I also think for the moms that struggle with anxiety in that area, it's a fair conversation to have, you know. So those are my 2 things. Sorry to be a little bit heavy, but I'm really excited about what's coming up next on the Maternal Podcast. Some topics that I have coming are really neat. I have a guest coming on who has uterus didelphys, which is 2 uterus, 2 cervices. I also am going to bring on the person who was kind of like the catalyst to me creating Maternal. Her birth story really just made me go, more people need to know that they have a right to say what they want and don't want. I also have another mom coming on. We're going to talk about bottle refusal. Both of our babies have gone through bottle refusal and what that looks like, and the pros and cons to that. I would love to do a deep dive into our cycles. Like I said at the beginning of the podcast, like your cycles post baby for some women just get so intense, and I want to dive into why that happens, what's happening with our hormone system. And then I also would love to do like an Ask a Lactation Consultant episode and carry that into like Ask a Midwife, Ask a Pediatrician, and interview professionals just to get your questions answered. So I'm really excited about what Maternal is going to turn into. I'm really happy that you're here with me, that you're watching this. And if you are here from the Founding Mothers, girl, thank you for sticking with me, because I promise you, I got some really great stuff coming. It's just, God's timing, not mine. And I'm trusting the process. So thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you on the next episode. Bye.